Hello guys, today I wanted to show how I made this folding toolbox for a protective case, what design mistakes I made, and how to avoid these design mistakes in the future projects. One of the reasons why I started this project is that I have a lot of tools which are scattered all over the table, and the other reason is that some of them break during transportation. So how about this? A small plastic protective case which has foam inside, but the problem is that this foam takes about 50% of inner space, so I'm not able to put all the instruments inside. Besides, this foam has only 2 layers, so it's not really convenient to use. I ended up with this toolbox design. As you can see, I used so-called scissor mechanism, which is attached to the bottom of protective case. The lower part is basically glued, and I also used standard 696 bearings. First I thought it will be an overkill to use bearings in this project, but actually it worked perfectly. The mechanism is held by this hook part, which has 2 positions, but it turns out that the second position is not needed. I used honeycomb structure to make box walls more rigid, and these tiny holes on the bottom parts are made for special pins which intended to fasten the tools inside. All big parts were divided to fit my 3D printer, and most of the parts are connected with screws. So when the hook part is released, the toolbox should fold like this. I used water wash resin from Anycubic and Kingrung, and it actually was my first mistake because I didn't know that this resin is really soft. Even after multiplying exposure time by 2, the resin was much softer than the standard one. I also tried to mix them just to see if there is any difference. As you can see, there is a color difference, but after I mixed it a little bit, there were no color difference on printed parts. It took about 2 bottles of resin to print all the parts. Generally, I am satisfied with the resin quality, but the rigidity of the printed parts were unexpectedly low. Fortunately, the rigidity of assembled boxes was okay. Screw joints on the box parts were okay as well. I just had to make sure I do not apply too much force when tightening the screws. And the shrinkage seal took place and some parts were twisted. Even after assembling the whole scissor mechanism, I thought that the rigidity will be enough to hold all 3 boxes and the stuff inside it. As you can see, I even made some holes in the mechanism part, which wasn't really a good idea. Also, one of the biggest mistakes here was the decision to use set screws to hold bearing inside the parts. Threads in this resin are very fragile, and I think I stripped a half of them and had to use glue instead. The box parts in contrast were absolutely okay. It turns out that the boxes by themselves can hold up to 3 kg each, but unfortunately scissor mechanism can hold only 3 kg in total. So my first advice is to avoid using water wash resin in mechanical parts, as this resin is too soft for such parts. Also, it's very important to add as much details as possible to your model. For example, I forgot to add this pressure valve into my model, and I was really frustrated when the boxes wasn't able to fit into the protective case. My third advice is to refresh your knowledge about mechanical joints and standard fasteners while starting your project. For example, on this part I decided to use set screws, however it would be much more reliable to use internal retaining rings. The fourth advice is to start using structural strength calculation software. As you can see, this part bends significantly in real-life application. I could have predicted this if I had used this software. To be honest, I still don't have one, but now I'm thinking that it could be a good investment. And in conclusion, I would like to encourage you to experiment, as 99% of prototypes ends up in the trash bin anyway, so don't afraid to make mistakes and learn. That's it, thank you for watching and have a nice day.